Hello, Old Gun Guy here. Today I'm going to do a video on the most popular 22 centerfire cartridge in the entire world, the 223 Remington, also known as the 5.56 by 45 millimeter, 5.56 NATO, and we'll go into the differences there. Its primary uses, when it was designed for, was an infantry cartridge for use against human adversaries. It excels in that role within its original design parameters, and I'll go into that. Hunting cartridge, yeah, I would use it up to, say, a coyotes and smaller. I wouldn't use it on deer. There are some jurisdictions where it's legal to use on deer. To me, under normal circumstances, you're just out lawfully hunting and not a survival situation. I would use something larger than 223 for hunting deer. It's just my personal ethics, hunting ethics. Competition, recreation, a fine cartridge, light recoiling. You can teach people who are unfamiliar with firearms how to use it effectively. It's easy. It doesn't beat the shooter up. And there's a reason why it's so extremely successful. When I do the shooting demonstrations, and it's mostly aimed at a defensive type use or anti-personnel use. The terminal effect target and the engaging steel plates at distances. I'm not going to do an accuracy test because I got 3 different firearms. I'm going to highlight the velocity differences between barrel lengths. And I have 3 firearms, 2 on AR platforms. And today, there's many manufacturers of the AR. I just call them AR platform rifles. And one's a Ruger Mini 14 in 223. An older one, a real older one, about 40 years old, and fine little carbine. They all have different barrel lengths and rifling twists. I'll go into that in the ballistics part. The 3 rifles I'll use, one's a 24-inch barreled 1-9 twist precision target rifle, or designated marksman rifle, as I built it and upgraded it. Most of the parts came from the original Bushmaster company out of Windham, Maine, not the modern version of it. The modern version, if you want the original Bushmaster crew and the parts, is Windham Weaponry. And they made AR parts for years. Second firearm, 18-inch barreled Ruger Mini 14, 1982 vintage. It's a 181 series. And the final one, I had some parts left over, and I ordered some parts from Brownell, and I built a Vietnam-era Colt Commando that the U.S. Special Forces would have used. Obviously, it's not full auto, it's a semi-automatic rifle. But it has a pencil barrel, very lightweight, 1-12 twist carbine barrel, CAR barrel. It's only 12 inches in length, the barrel. It has a muzzle device to make it look like the original Colt Commando, welded to the barrel to ensure legality. You're going to have short barrel rifles if you go through the tax stamp process with the feds. But it's just a cool looking, handy little carbine. I had some parts laying around. I built it. A lot of fun to shoot. And but I'll compare the velocity differences with the 3 different barrel lengths with 2 different type of ammunitions. One is 5.56 by 45 NATO, German-made Gecko, 55 grain FMJ. The other one will be PMC bronze load 223 Remington. It's listed on the box, but it's 55 grain full metal jacket projectile also. They list like 2,900 on a box. The history, the cartridge started as the United States military, the Army Command wanted a 22 caliber light assault rifle. That term has been bastardized over the years, but it came from World War II. The Germans had observed that most of the combat was 300 yards or less. Probably 96% of it, 95% of it. They didn't need a full power 7.92 Mauser round like a 30-06 power level, full power rifle cartridge and rifle to engage adversaries that were 100, 200, 300 yards away. In combat, it's hard seeing anybody that far away, unless they're in an open field. Most people, if they want to stay alive in combat, don't prance around an open field for long. They developed a shortened version. They shortened the 57 millimeter case down to 33 millimeters, lighter bullet, 120 something grains, and the storm rifle concept that Adolf Hitler, I believe, gave it that name, Sturmgewehr, storm rifle, for his assault troops. The service rifle in the time of the 50s was a modified M1 Garand, which was basically the M14, detachable box magazine. They shortened the 30-06 case, modern powders to get almost the same performance or superior performance in some aspects, and large rifle. They're not really that accurate. Every one I've ever fired, they're 3.5 MOA guns. Yes, you have accurized ones that people get upset. They're okay. They're good enough for what they were designed for. The military wanted a 22 caliber rifle, weighed 6 pounds, fired a projectile capable of going through a World War II helmet, one side of it at 500 yards, and staying supersonic, or at, just about not go subsonic until at least 500 yards. And in Fairchild Aircraft, they had two brilliant engineers. One was Eugene Stoner, who created the AR-10 rifle and then scaled it down to the AR-15, which became wildly successful, and the longest serving military rifle in United States history from his design. Brilliant design, very modular. The AR platforms, I call them the 350 Chevy small block engine of the gun world. Today there's many parts, they're modular, they're easy to work on. Novices can build any type of rifle they want out of it. The cartridge, Jim Sullivan, he was in Armalite also. He worked with Remington to try and develop the cartridge that would meet the Army requirements. They started out with a 222 Remington cartridge case, and it didn't have they couldn't safely get the performance out of it with the case size. There was a larger cartridge, a 222 Remington Magnum, that had the case capacity. So they kind of split the difference, come out to 223 Remington, which met the Army's goals. It had a muzzle velocity of a 20-inch barrel at 3,250 feet a second. It stayed supersonic to 500 yards, and it would punch through one side of a steel World War II Army helmet at 500 yards. They also wanted the wounding capability of the M2 carbine, which it obviously vastly exceeded. And they adopted the rifle and the cartridge in '63. So 61 years, some form of the AR, the military designation M16, then it goes through all the letter designations, A1, A2, all the way down, so on and so forth. But the original rifle, as it was adopted, had a 1 in 14-inch rifling twist, which was just enough to stabilize the 55 grain projectile, except in Arctic conditions. When it got the air got very cold, it wouldn't stabilize a bullet at distance. So they quickened the twist to 1 in 12, and that's where it stayed for almost 20 years there. The M16, the M16A1 platforms throughout the 60s and 70s, the Vietnam War, and after the Vietnam War, service rifle into the early 80s. In Vietnam, the 55 grain loading, most of the guns were 20-inch barreled A1 platforms, achieved below 150 yards of severe wounding effects on the adversaries. And so much so that some of the countries protested to the United Nations that the U.S. was using unlawful ammunition in war, expanding ammunition. It was just a high velocity varmint bullet impacting human beings, had the same effects it had on prairie dogs. They're explosive, ripping apart and tumbling of the bullet, and the bullet breaks apart and fragments and it create very difficult wounds. The imitations is sincerest form of flattery, and the Soviet Union, which was backing the Vietnamese, took notice of all this field evidence and developed their own version. Their cartridge, which I believe was copied from the Germans, although there's people that say that they developed it separately, but the 7.62 by 39, 30 caliber cartridge. They 5.45 by 39 millimeter AK-74 round, introduced in 1974, and I put the two on next to each other. The 223 and a 5.45, and it's funny how the 223 spawned. Just about every military on Earth is using a 22 caliber centerfire of some type on the battlefield. The Chinese have their own version. I think it's 5.8 millimeter. The Russian 5.45. NATO uses the American 223 Remington. Obviously, the United States. So it's spawned a wide imitation. The Russians made their bullet so it would flip and fragment regardless of the velocity. They tend to put all the mass in the rear of the bullet, so whenever it struck anything denser than air, the bullet would tumble and flip, and that's what they wanted. That's the effect they wanted, and it had a very good effect. In the late 70s, early 80s, I think the Marine Corps wanted something that wanted the 223 updated, or 5.56, where it had a little more range, a little more velocity. So they went to a heavier projectile, a little more downrange performance, 62 grain projectile, and it did have a little more long range performance, but they could have got by with like a 1 to 10 rifle and twist for that, but they had a tracer round which wouldn't stabilize, so they went all the way down to 1 to 7, and that's a lot of rotational velocity when you're firing a projectile 3,000 feet a second. A lot of RPMs, probably 350,000, 340,000 RPMs, the bullets spinning. And it became adopted as the A2 platform. And then now they've gone down to the carbine length barrels of 14.5-inch barrels in military, most of them. And the shorter barrels is you're taking some of the terminal effect away from the round. Within its design parameters, say 0 to 300, 350 yards tops, it's a very fine defensive anti-personnel cartridge, but you're not going to turn it into a 308 or a 3006 or a 7.62 by 54 and stretch it out to 800-900 yards. You can hit targets that far away. My precision rifle I built, I routinely shoot 8-inch steel plates at 600 yards with it. 69 grain Sierra Match Kings though, not 55 grain ball. And everybody wants one thing to do everything. One cartridge cannot do everything. What it was originally designed for, combat 0 to 300 yards, it excels at. It's a good round. Beyond that, its striking energy diminishes rapidly. You're almost down to the ballistics of a 22 long rifle at the muzzle at 500, 550 yards with a 55 grain bullet. So that's the basic history. The current military load, I think it's M855. It's got like a 62 grain projectile with a little tiny steel penetrator in it. Again, if you want to go through armor or stuff, you need something heavier than that. Since I'm discussing mostly the rule of law in self-defense, or the self-defense applications for this cartridge, rule of law, you get police departments working, courts, the government is up and functioning. How would you employ this in self-defense? Obviously inside your house. A 223 is not a bad cartridge as rifle cartridges go, because it's high velocity. Room distances, whatever it impacts, it's going to fragment and bust apart. It's not going to travel to multiple walls of your house. It'll go through a couple walls, but it'll start flipping and fragmenting. And if it goes through an adversary, it's somebody attacking you, it's not going to travel far before it's smacking a wall and destroying itself. However, you get the old muzzle blast and noise, and if you've ever fired firearms inside a room or inside a house, and I have, I was 33 years in the police department, I was 13 years in a tactical team, and I've shot in live fire shoot houses. The police department I was in was 800 to 1,000 people, and I was fortunate enough to go to FBI schools, and actually a few schools taught by the U.S. Navy SEALs in the 1990s. As they were scaling down from the Cold War, they were downsizing the military, everybody was looking for a mission, and they weren't as well known back then as they are today, but very cool guys, very good information. And our primary entry tools were the same as theirs. MP5, Heckler & Koch MP5 submachine guns. We did carry ARs, and I've used both in a shoot house. And we didn't have the modern headgear that they have today with the earphones integrated into the helmets with the radio sets inside them. We had just simple rubber earplugs to stick in our ears. And you have 4 or 5 guys shooting automatic weapons, even if they're only 9mm in close quarters, 3-4 feet away in a room. The concussion and the noise is pretty intense. When you do that with 223, it's magnified by a whole lot. So that's my personal experience with it. You keep that in mind. I have a pair of earplugs on a string on my shotgun that's in the closet for home defense, attached to the sling in case I had to use them and blow my eardrums out. Technology, goes a long way, but the tactics kind of stay the same. Everybody wants to build a better mousetrap, but the basics last through the ages. And that's where you get to know your history, where things come from. So in rule of law uses, could you use a rifle at a distance? To protect yourself personally, it would be very difficult to justify. To protect an innocent third party is a different story. Usually the use of deadly force in self-defense is limited to you or protecting a third party, innocent third party. For instance, say there's a terrorist attack, Israel-type terrorist attack in your town, and there's multiple teams shooting things up, and they come into your neighborhood and they're shooting your neighbors and shooting people on the street. Yes, you take out your rifle and you engage them at a distance. That's called lawful use of deadly force in the defense of a third party. I've testified in a lot of court cases, a lot of experience in the courts. Like I said, I was in a very busy police department for 33 years. I was in the Northeast. Our personnel varied from 800 to 1,000, depending on the year or years during my tenure. So very dense packed too, 25, 27,000 people per square mile, piled on top of each other. And a lot of crime, a lot of violence. So a lot of people shot, but we're not going to go into that right now. I would check with a local lawyer and find out the lawful rules of use of deadly force in your particular jurisdiction. It may have changed in the last few years. In some of the jurisdictions, they've gone off the railroad tracks, as far as I can see. Obviously, say you're on a rural property and your wife or son goes down and greets some strangers at the gate on your lane or your road, and all of a sudden they're attacked. And someone gets out with a bat, someone gets out with a gun, a shotgun or whatever. You grab your rifle and you engage the assaulters, the adversaries. Yes, that would be an example. Like I said, I'm not here discussing the fine points of law, of the lawful use of deadly force in defense of a innocent third party. Your wife or son is being, these criminals are trying to murder at your front gate down on your property. You could think of numerous variations of that, but before you employ it, the best use of deadly force is the use you don't have to use it. If you can avoid using deadly force, your life's going to be better for it. Not like the movies, especially rule of law. No matter how justified you are, you're going to go through the meat grinder of the court system, the prosecutor. If you have a honorable prosecutor, probably none will happen. If you have a dishonest, political motivated one, they'll throw you under the bus. And it could cost you a fortune and a lot of turmoil. But if you have to use deadly force to defend your life or someone innocent, by all means do it, because you got to live with yourself in the end. And it's better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. And going to the ballistics, as I said, the 222 Remington parent is a parent cartridge of the 223. The rifling twists have changed over the years from 1 and 14, which is standard for all 22 centerfires. 220 Swift, 22 to 50. Like I said, at distance, they for the 223 they had to increase it to 1 and 12, and it had a very good track record with that rifling twist. The cartridge has a 378 thousandths case head, slightly bigger than a 9mm case head, and its maximum range of projectiles is 77 grain or 80 grain. If you fired them for distance, 4,900 yards, almost 3 miles, 32 or 33 degrees off the horizon. Rifle cartridges deadly their whole flight. So at 4,900 yards, if you're shooting a thing up in the air, you can kill somebody that far away. Always know your backstop, always know what you're shooting at. With the 55 grain loads, it's about 3,500 yards or 2 miles. That would be its max range. Impact velocity. The magic number is 2,700 feet per second, and that's from numerous tests that the FBI ran and other agencies ran over the years. Military, 2,700 feet and above, the 55 grain M193 creates very serious, effective wounds for stopping an adversary. From 25 to 2,700, it still creates very serious or effective wounds, but not as dramatic or catastrophic as the very high velocity impacts. Below like 2,400 feet a second, it tends to put ice pick holes through the adversary, and not fragment or tumble or rip apart as easily as it does at the higher impact velocities. Barrel length affects the impact velocity and the distance that you cross the 2,700 foot threshold or the 2,500 foot threshold, and that's just something to keep in mind. The 62 grain heavier 5.56 projectiles are they leave the muzzle about 3,100 feet a second, and the 55 grains 3,200, 3,250. When they adopted the A2 and the 5.45 NATO, the modern rounds, the 8.55, they added free bore to the front of the chamber, of the 5.56 chamber. So free bore is the rifling's removed. There's a smooth portion of the barrel where the bullet enters the barrel, not engaging rifling right away. And it's a common technique on Magnum rifles, 300 Weatherby Magnums. They all have large free bore. The 350 Remington Magnum that I demonstrated in an earlier video has free bore. So the bullet jumps out of the case before it engages the rifling, and it keeps the pressure, peak pressures down. The chamber pressure for the 5.55, the 223 Remington is 55,000 psi, but established by SAMI, the Sporting Arms Manufacturing Institute. In the U.S., the SAMI spec for 5.56 NATO is 58,000 psi. The European spec, the CIP, is 62,000 psi. Now, you can fire 223 in a 5.56 chamber. I've fired 5.56 and 223 chambers. To do it on a regular basis, you're going to wear the gun out quicker. It does cause a pressure increase. I've never seen flattened primers or any signs of pressure doing that, but it's not recommended. The military load in the free bore keeps the peak pressure down. They load it just a little hotter. So if you fire 5.56 at a 223 chamber, it's going to develop a little more peak pressure. It may peak to 61 or 62,000 psi from 55. Is it going to blow the gun up? No, it shouldn't. Any safe firearm chamber in 223 should be able to handle that. The proof loads, I believe, is 77,000 psi when they test the firearms. So there is a measure of safety there. That said, if you get a 223 chamber, fire 223 ammo in it. And if you have a 5.56, because it's got free bore, you can fire anything in it. However, the 5.56 chamber is not going to be as accurate as a 223 Remington chamber because the rifling's right there. The bullet, there's less chance for the bullet to yaw when it enters a rifling, creating instability. So if you want an accurate rifle, 223 Remington chamber. They've come out with hybrid chamber now between the two, the wild chamber, so you can fire anything in that, and then the 1-in-8 twist. And I really don't fire projectiles in a 223 heavier than 69 grain, the Sierra Match Kings. You know, the military had to try and adapt because they had to work with what they had. So they put the real heavy for caliber projectiles, the 77 grain ones, so they would shed less velocity and be more effective at longer ranges, 500-600 yards. They were encountered in Afghanistan, but for the average person, that's there's nothing you really need to be shooting with 77 grain. With that, go to shooting demonstration. I'll shoot some steel plates. Do the velocity comparison with the 3 different firearms, the 3 different barrels. I have to go out again, a 24-inch AR platform, precision rifle, 18-inch Ruger Mini 14 barrel, and the full CAR build with the 12-inch barrel and the permanently fixed muzzle device. So you should get 3 different velocity readings and how that, what that means as far as impact velocity and the distances. I'll go through a ballistic chart where each velocity crosses from each length barrel has the 2,700 foot, what distance it drops below that, and what distance it drops below 2,500 feet a second. But I'll do that in the summary. Shoot a terminal effects target, the water jugs and the plywood, and try and capture the fragmenting 223 rounds or the tumbling. And with that, we'll go to the shooting demonstration. Okay, we're outside the shooting table. I selected 3 firearms for the velocity comparison. The first one you see here, visible in the shot, is it's got a 24-inch barrel, fluted. It's a target gun, designated marksman rifle, whatever you'd like to call it. The barrel and the upper originally came from the original Bushmaster company in Windham, Maine. They're a big supplier of quality AR parts. In fact, I think the company one time was called Quality Parts. Before Remington took it over and moved it out of Maine. It now exists as Windham weaponry. It's been reconstituted by the original crew. That's another story in itself. Fluid barrel. It's got a 11-inch target crown. I'm going to take the camera off the tripod and show it. This rifle, I routinely, it's extremely accurate, even with 55 grain ball. It has a 1-in-9 twist barrel. It's the best load it's optimized for is a 69 grain Sierra Match King, either the Federal Gold Medal Match or the Black Hills match, loaded with the 69 grain Sierra Match King. On my own hand load is loaded with the same projectile. There's a known distance range I take this out to sometime, public range, 1 to 600 yard steel plates, and I have no problem bringing the 6 and 8-inch plates at 600 yards with this rifle routinely. It's a pleasure to shoot. I've had it for, I'm going to say, about 27 years. On top, it's got a Redfield Battle Zone scope, 3x9 power. It's actually got a cam to dial in. It's actually optimized for 55 grain FMJ. It's pretty accurate. Dial 2, 3, 4, 5, 100 yards. The next firearm here, like I said, I'll give you a close-up of these, is a 1982 vintage Ruger Mini 14, 181 series, stainless. This has an 18-inch barrel, 1 in 10 twist rifling, and it's a handy little firearm. This is before they come out with the fiberglass heat shield upper handguard. This is all wood. And lastly, this was a build with some Brownell parts. Brownell's, the gunsmithing company. This is a pencil barrel weight, 1 in 12 twist, Vietnam era Colt Commando barrel and build. This muzzle device is permanently affixed to the firearm. It's welded on, so it meets the 16-inch length, but it's only got a 12-inch or 12.5-inch barrel. So we'll use this as to demonstrate the velocity comparison. 12-inch, 18, 24. The Ruger Mini 14 splits the difference. This little carbine is very fun to shoot, very handy. If it weighs 6 pounds, it's a lot. It's lightweight, featherweight. Let me take the camera off the tripod and show close up. Okay, this is the ammunition I'm going to be shooting. It's 5.56 NATO. It's Gecko. It's a German made ammunition, NATO spec. M193 load, 55 grain full metal jacket boat tail, and PMC bronze, 223 Remington. It says on the box about 2,900 feet per second, so it's loaded a little lower than standard 223. The muzzle device in the Vietnam era, it wasn't to suppress sound or anything. It was to change the sound signature so it would sound like an AK-47. It's A1 upper, but it's forward assist teardrop. The Ruger Mini 14, handy little carbine, a lot of fun to shoot. And if you're in a kingdom where they don't allow you to have an AR, this is a very good alternative. The modern ones are more accurate than the older ones. This gun is about 4 to 5 MOA at 100. But it'll still get the job done out to about 250 on a man-sized target. And the last one, I don't know if this will come in. You can see the concave crown on the muzzle. 24-inch fluted barrel. It really ain't that heavy, this gun. Maybe 8.5, 9 pounds. 9 pounds maybe with the scope. I got a Magpul stock on it. I got my dope written on the back here all the way up to 700 yards. Yes, you can hit things at long range with a 223, but it's never going to be a 308 or a 300 Winchester Magnum. It's got very little energy at them distances, regardless of the bullet weight. And the heaviest bullet you can stabilize in a 1.9 twist is about 69 grain. It's a good compromise twist because the fast twist, if you try and shoot 50 grain or varmint type bullets, they explode from the centrifugal force. Too many rotations, too many RPMs. And that'll be the 3 firearms for the velocity comparison. We'll see what we shall see. Back on the tripod. After the velocity, I'm going to shoot some steel plates with this gun. Keep chopping my head off here. After we do the velocity comparison, I'm going to shoot some of this 55 grain ball at various steel plates as quick as I can hit them. From 220 yards, 140 yards, 100 yards, 80 yards, 75 yards. And there's pepper poppers, there's torso targets, there's round plates. And this gun, or if you build an accurized AR, excels in that role. 0 to 300 yards. Very low recoil, very fast on target, and it really does a nice job. In case you had to employ it in that role. I also do test shooting 55 grain ball out of the Ruger. It's kind of compromised, 18-inch barrel, into internal effect target. Water jug, piece of plywood. I'll try and put some of this very thin hardboard between the water jugs to capture the projectile. If it's tumbling and fragmentation, hopefully, in the target, we'll give that a shot. And any other tests I throw in, I'll just explain them a little later on in the video. And with that, let's get to the chronograph. Now the Ruger. Okay, on the chronograph, first up is the 12.5-inch carbine barrel, 5.56 NATO, the Gecko rounds, three shots. And the second rifle will be the Ruger Mini 14, 18.5-inch barrel, and the last will be the Bushmaster with the 24-inch barrel. We'll record the differences. Now the Ruger. Now the 24-inch Bushmaster. Okay, now we're going to shoot the PMC 223 ammo, 55 grain full metal jacket. First out of the 12-inch carbine, the Ruger Mini 14 18-inch barrel, and the 24-inch barrel Bushmaster. Now the Ruger. Okay, we're back. Got a little terminal effect target there. I had full water jugs. 6-inch water jug, 3/4-inch piece of plywood. I numbered it number 1. 2 more water jugs, and a second piece of plywood, followed by a water jug. And we're going to fire the 5.56 NATO Gecko round, the West German mil-spec round, and put this camera in slow motion. And I'm going to film it with the other camera in regular speed and see what we can capture. And let me get that set up. Alright, that was the Ruger Mini 14. Okay, we're back. The terminal effects test I did before this had first jug that got hit before the plywood blew up so much water it dosed the camera really bad. And when I tried to do an explanation of what happened, it was just the audio was gone. So clean the camera up real good. Hopefully it's working all right. We're going to do the have another camera on it at a distance, zoomed in, and I'm going to back this up another 20 feet before I shoot. Basically, first test, blew up the 3 water jugs. Went through the first one, drilled through the plywood, and started tumbling and fragmenting, which is what I was trying to show. And never hit the 4th water jug or the piece of plywood. But the 1 water jug had fragments that going off to the sides and up. So that's basically what a 223 did. For this testing, I have a water jug, 3/4 inch piece of wood. This is a piece of 1x8. I ran out of plywood. Water jug. This stuff is real thin hardboard. I put it between each water jug. Hopefully we can capture in it the fragmentation or tumbling of the round. Important impact velocity to remember with a 223, 2,700 feet a second. Catastrophic effective wounds. 2,700 feet and above. 2,500 feet to 2,700 feet, still very effective wounds. Below that, you start getting screwdriver holes. It doesn't flip or fragment nearly as much, and it's not nearly as effective. So that's why it's a 0 to 300 yard cartridge for human adversaries. And that's what the military is trying to turn into a 308 and shoot stuff at 500, 600, 700 yards. And yes, you can put very heavy for caliber 77 grain match king type rounds. They call them open tip match because of the Geneva Convention. Can't have expanding ammunition in a military conflict. But I'm going to set the 2 cameras up. I'll put this one in slow motion again, but I'll put it back a ways and try and zoom in. And we'll see how this goes. Okay, this time we didn't dose the camera. The 223 at high velocity has a lot of explosive effect. It basically blew up and shredded this water jug. You can see fragments starting. Begin to yaw wildly. The aiming point was down around here. The round traveling sideways and caught the top of the other water jug and ripped that apart. And it never hit any of the other the hardboards. So that's the exit. Yeah, not a mark on the hardboards, just the water. And this time we didn't dose the camera. I'm going to try and do it again. There's enough water jugs left here, and I'll stick a hardboard in front. I'll still use this piece of wood. I got one, if you can see it, it's kind of a sideways hole. That's what the 223 does, it flips. That's where it creates that serious wounding effect. Poison bullet effect, if you will. Let me set this up again and we'll try it again. Okay, we're just going to ring some steel plates from, say, 75 yards to 220 yards with the 24-inch varminter or DMR style rifle, and let me zoom in on the plates. Well, I'll start at the 220 and work my way in. Okay, we're back. I had to cut out the audio from the explanation from the second terminal effect target because the water dosed the camera really bad, and it stayed in slow motion. It was messed up. I'll go into the summary, but we did capture the projectile tumbling and fragmenting as it should at that velocity. And I'll go over into the summary. 10 little steel plate demonstration to shoot the Ruger, 10 rounds, and the little CAR carbine and various steel plates, and then we'll go in for the summary. And now the Ruger. Which will be a demonstration of the two handy little carbines. And we'll go inside for the summary. 10 little steel plate demonstration to shoot the Ruger, 10 rounds, and the little CAR carbine and various steel plates. And then we'll go in for the summary. Now the Ruger. And we're back for our summary. The series of tests I did were just to showcase the differences in velocity. It was more aimed at from a self-defense use of the 223. It is the most popular 22 centerfire cartridge for a reason. Light recoiling, accurate. It comes in a wide variety of platforms, from the most popular semi-automatic, the AR-15 style clones, bolt-action rifles, many other different semi-automatic rifles. I used to call them military pattern semi-automatic rifles, or military pattern semi-autos. I think today they call them modern sporting rifles. The whole Orwellian newspeak, assault rifle, assault weapons. There's a military designation for assault rifle. It's a selective fire light infantry rifle, not firing a full power rifle cartridge. And the language is used to control thought. Shift the words used, the definitions. But whatever you call it, it's intermediate power cartridge. It bridges the difference between pistol and a full power rifle round. The designers of the cartridge, who took the 222 Remington and the 222 Remington Magnum and created the 223, made a very successful cartridge. It's a very accurate cartridge for hunting for varmints, woodchucks, groundhogs, prairie dogs, squirrels, whatever you're going to shoot. Out to a couple hundred yards, 200, 250 yards. Coyote. I wouldn't shoot deer with it, but that's my personal hunting ethics. A lot of states you can't hunt with a 223 for deer. It's not legal. But there are some that are. I think it's a little light in that category, but to each his own. It was designed as an anti-personnel round, 0 to 300 yards. That's where it excels. In the wars in the Middle East the last 20 years, the military had longer engagement distances, and that's why they went to the heavier and heavier for caliber bullets to try and give it the 223 a little more, or the 5.56 NATO, a little more punch at distance. And they were successful to some degree. And then they even deviated. I think the Special Forces, they wanted something that hit heavier, and they come out that 6.8 SPC, another very fine cartridge that would fit an AR platform. And then the 300 Blackout come out, and all of these cartridges, the 300 Blackout, the 204 Ruger, 17 Remington, they're all descendants of the 222 Remington, and the 223 is one of the descendants. It made such an impression in Vietnam on the enemy forces and the people backing them, the Chinese and the Russians. The Russians switched to a 22 caliber centerfire, their own version. And I don't know if I showed it clearly in the earlier introduction, but 545 by 39, Russian, Soviet, and the 223 5.56 NATO round, and obviously the earlier Russian round, the AK-47 round, 7.62 by 39, and the 5.45, and there's a lot of dispute over whether the Russians copied this from the Germans in World War II. Their 7.92 Kurtz, where they developed it on their own. I kind of think they copied it when they were on the receiving end of it. It was a idea that was ahead of its time, and it carries on to this day. You can punch paper with a 223 with heavy bullets all the way out to 1,000 yards. In any type of defensive or use against the bad guys, it's a 0 to 300 yard cartridge, maybe 350. But I did the velocity comparison. We did that, did the chronograph, and I had 3 different barrel lengths: 12, 18, and 24 inch. The 24 inch had a 1 in 9 twist. The Ruger Mini 14 had a 1 in 10 twist and a 1 in 12 twist on the little CAR, Vietnam era style CAR carbine. And I'll go over the velocity averages and what they mean. Okay. Let's see if they come up here. Yep. First up was the Gecko M193 NATO loads. Out of the CAR, the 12-inch barrel with the fake muzzle device from the Vietnam era war there. Average velocity was 2,815 feet a second. For the Ruger Mini 14 18-inch barrel, it jumps up to 3,000, almost 3,100, 3,097 feet a second. The Bushmaster DMR rifle, 24-inch barrel, 3,357. So there's a spread of 540 feet per second difference on the muzzle velocities on the 3 different barrel lengths. The PMC 223 Remington, a 55 grain FMJ boat tail. The CAR, the 12-inch, 2760. Out of the Ruger Mini 14, jumps up to 2956, and then the Bushmaster, the DMR, the 24-inch, 3,175. There's a spread of about 415 feet a second between the barrel lengths. The cartridge's terminal effects is dependent on the velocity it impacts the target at. This is for defense, self-defense, personal protection, home defense. 2,700 feet per second is the threshold where the 55 grain bullet will really flip and fragment and create very serious wounds. From 2500 to 2700, it still creates very effective wounds. But as you get below that and approach 2400 feet a second, it tends to just drill holes to the bad guy. And like I said, I think in one of the earlier clips, in the Vietnam War, Sweden, some of the other countries protested mightily, like the U.S. was using illegal ammunition in war because of the wounds that the Vietnam era 1 in 12 twist M16 rifles were causing at distances below, say, 150 yards, 125 yards. And the Sweden got so mad they refused to sell our special forces their Swedish K submachine gun, and Smith & Wesson had to make an unlicensed copy for the special forces guys. That's how much turmoil it created, or controversy. So I have the thresholds here derived from Sierra Infinity ballistic software. I only went out to 300 yards with it and did it in 5-yard increments, the data. So I put all the muzzle velocities, and I have the distances where it crosses the 2700 feet a second threshold and the 2500 feet a second threshold. So with the Gecko and the CAR at 35 yards, it's down to 2500 feet a second, 2700 feet a second. At 85 yards, it crosses at 2500 feet per second threshold. They're Mini 14, 105 yards until it hits the 2700 foot per second threshold, and 155 yards for the 2500 feet per second. The Bushmaster, 165 yards for the 2700 threshold, and 215 yards for the 2500 foot threshold. There's a wide disparity there. Obviously, the little CAR carbine, or if you get a shorter barreled, legal NFA weapon, a short barrel rifle, or some of these pistol builds with these 10-inch barrels, you're giving up all they're cool looking, I guess, but you get a barrel that's short, you get increased muzzle blast from all the powder burning outside the barrel, not propelling a bullet down the barrel. So most of the carbines I see at 16-inch barrel ARs, and that's a good effective barrel length for the cartridge. It's even less with the PMC 222 Remington. Obviously, it's dependent on whatever ammunition you're using, but the car, it's 15 yards at the 2770 yards, and then the Mini 14, 65 and 125, and then the Bushmaster 120 and 175. So with that 24-inch barrel, that's about all the performance you're going to get out of you get the maximum performance out of a 223 Remington. And it has 11-degree target round on it. It has no flash hider or muzzle brake, because with a 24-inch barrel, you don't need it. There is no, all the powder's burned up in a barrel and it's used to propel a projectile. And it really ain't unwieldy. The gun is not really unwieldy to move around if you're building a precision rifle. The water thermal effects targets, I had to do it 3 times. The first one, it hit the board, started flipping, went through the water, hit the board, started flipping, and I have part of the board that flipped over. I kept the same board because I had to repeat the test because the camera got dosed with water, and it messed up the audio, and the camera's going in slow motion, fast motion. I had to film it a couple times. So I did the test 3 times. I think they're all on there. But what the second test, I put the third test, I should say. The second test, I got parts of the board here. It all broke apart. The second test, it went through the board sideways. No, I put the I put the hardboard in front, then the water jug, then the 1x8. First test, the bullet just, after it hit the water, it flipped and clipped the top of this, and made it to the third water jug and just shredded the top of the water jug. The third test was actually the most useful. I had a piece of hardboard in front of the water jug. I had the water jug, which is 6 inches of water. I had a 1x8. Then I had all these thin hardboards all the way down. So the first shot was right there, drilled clean through, in and out. You see it's a nice round bullet hole. It hit the first water jug and blew it to smithereens. And well, it hit the board too, at the back end of the first water jug, and blew the board apart because the bullet was flying sideways. But it had these chunks of wood, and it split the board in half, and the chunks flew out. So in the one that's number 2, there's a giant hole in here. That's one of the chunks of wood going through that. But the more interesting thing is the projectiles flip sideways, and it's up quite a bit from where it was aimed. I don't know if that comes across. It was aimed here, and on the second one, it's flipping sideways, tumbling through the media. And then the third one, it's still tumbling after it hits hit the second water jug, and it went sideways through the third one too, and then flew off into space, or fragmented, or whatever it did. But that's a representation of high impact velocity 223, what it would do, and it was pretty dramatic. And that's what it was designed to do by the designers. It was a varmint round back in the 50s, and they developed that. Just about every army in the world's using a 22 centerfire of some type, which I find it kind of interesting. So Eugene Stoner's design, him and the cartridge designer, they had a resounding success. It's the longest serving military cartridge and rifle in probably in U.S. history. It's 60 plus years now. I don't think even a 30-06 lasted that long. 1906 to the early 50s. So the 223 is 5.56 is far exceeded. The steel plates, with my DMR, I did the test, just rapidly engaging them. 220, 145, I think that other plate is 100. There's plates at 80, 75, and very quick, boom, 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 in and out. Very easy, very accurate. Demonstrates that ability to rapidly engage targets with a proper rifle. And the AR excels at that. You can do that with a red dot, or iron sights, or low powered optic, or whatever, however you have your rifle set up. And there's many other platforms. There's H&K clones, use a completely different system, roller delayed blowback, and some of the piston guns. SIG makes rifles of different designs, and Ruger does too. And obviously the Mini 14 is a different type of platform, scaled down from the original M1 Garand M14. And then I shot the 2 carbines, a Ruger Mini 14, just to engage plates or show the handy, fast handling. And for my firing position, the plates ran from 20 to about 80 yards. That's because I was standing 20 yards up on the firing line from where the 100-yard mark is. So the 100-yard plate was 80 yards from me, and no problem engaging with either rifle. I think at the 80-yard plate, I shot low with the Mini 14 one shot, but 9 out of 10 with the Mini 14, and 10 out of 10 with the CAR iron sights. And they're both handy rifles, and it wasn't the rifle's fault that I shot low. It's just, that's me and my old eyes. The stainless sights, I probably should darken the front sight, but it might have got lost a little bit on me. A stainless steel rifle. Home defense, I did this more from like a defensive type use, not so much as a hunting or target use. Yes, a great recreational gun for competitive shooting. My first AR I bought 42 years ago. I still have it. It's a Colt SP1. It's even the pre-A1 platform. There's no forward assist on it. A1 sights, everyone carry, you know. I think I paid $400 for that. I still have the receipt in my records. All them years ago. Shot thousands of rounds out of it. A lot of fun to shoot. I even shot it in competition, you know, different things. I used it in 3-gun a few times, and then I shot it on an array, you know, high-powered type course. I think in today's money it's like $1,300 or $1,400, you know, buying wise. So they weren't cheap back then, and they really weren't well known. You didn't see many of them around back then, anywhere, range, gun club. But they've taken off in the last, I'm going to say, 25 years or so. They've really taken off. They've, you know, there's many manufacturers, and for good reason. A good, easy gun to work on. Novices can learn how to use it, shoot them well, and that's about it. If I was to use this for inside the house home defense, it's actually a good round for interior use because of the fragmentation effect of the high velocity, you know, 55 grain projectiles. If you strike a bad guy, you have to defend your life in your house. It's probably not going to exit him. If it exits him, it's not going to go far. It's going to smack a wall. That's going to be the end of it. If you miss, it's going to start tumbling, fragmenting in the walls or furniture, whatever it's going to hit. It's not going to penetrate like a 308 going through your walls and through the house and outside the house. It's going to be very loud inside the house. I'd have some kind of ear protection, ear plugs or something tied to your gun if that's your defense gun for the house. And I probably use expanding projectiles, either soft point, you know, 55 grain soft points, hunting rounds, or 55 grain like Hornady VMAX, something like that. If they shoot well in your gun, that would be my inside the house defense load. Like I said, all guns are tools. It's a great versatile target tool, competition tool, hunting tool, and the defend your life tool within its design parameters. With that, if you like the content, just like and subscribe, and that'll be our 223 Remington 5.56 video. Old Gun Guys signing off.